And I also promise I will not say very much today. So let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would, please. I pledge allegiance
to
to
the
the
flag of the United States
of
of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Can I get a motion to call to order, please, for the work session? All in favor? Aye. We have a lot to go through tonight. We are going to start with our tentative budget presentation. Tim Bullock our chief financial person, will take us through it, our treasurer. This budget does pierce the tax cap as it stands right now. We will take a vote on being able to do that. We are hoping that we can get it down below the tax cap, but if not, that's why we are going to take the vote just in case. But I don't think there's, there's still some things to be worked in the budget, but I don't think it is a astronomical out of whack budget. So, Tim, if you want to take us through primarily what's changed since the last time, but also anything that we need to know about, tell us, how high we're piercing the cap and what we can expect. And then what will happen is this will be published on our website. Everyone can go through it, make comments, etc. And we will take public comments at our April board meeting and then either vote that night or the following month to approve it. Tim? I don't know if you need to share your screen.
Hi, everybody. I don't think so. So right now, we're piercing the cap. As she just said, it's 422,000 over what the regular cap is, which is about 5.4% over our cap of I think it's 3.63%. So what's changed from the prior budget that I proposed, general support, we're increasing they're proposing to increase the part-time. The part-time is for justice court for an additional day. And then they're also restoring the custodial budget line to how it was in the previous year. I originally had us reducing those numbers just because I was trying to pay for additional vehicles to purchase for the custodial. For public safety, we reduced the budget by the part-timer building salary. We had an additional one in there. I took that one out. And then the fire department had additional insurance and dock fees. And they also wanted to restore their equipment and supply lines. But that was offset by the LoSAP contractual amount that we got in finally. For health services, from the prior budget proposed, we're reduced. It's an increase for additional part-time and full-time hours requested by ambulance. This will put them from 12 hours to 14 hours. And then there's additional full-timer they also wish to add on to their team. And then for transportation, this is also increased over my proposal. They requested additional overtime for the guys there. They also requested additional supplies, paving, and snow expenses, what was originally proposed. The economic community development decreased only $1,000. That's just because the Historical Society didn't need our donation that we normally submit. And then for culture and recreation, this was a big jump because of personnel expenses, because of COVID and the way we had a salary and budget for that. But then also we increased it back to the previous year's contractual lines for what's required and needed for the parks. Home and community services, we increased this for the tree care, and then we left a little bit for the drainage project as well. And then finally, the employee benefits, This was reduced again from the LoSAP contract, coming in a little bit lower, but then there's additional benefits for the ambulance full-timer and part-timers that were requested by ambulance. So it was offset, and that increased the budget a little bit. And finally, sewer, they increased because there was a contractual stipend that we missed. So that increased by that stipend, and then the benefits that go along with that stipend. So overall, from my original proposal, it's additional 280,000 over what was proposed for the general fund and 25,000 over for the sewer fund. And that's it.
And Tim, how much is that over the tax cap?
Right now, we're over the tax cap by 400. Sorry, just lost that page. 422,650.
Which I can't do percentage fast enough, but did you get a chance to do the percentage of that?
That's yeah, it's 5.4%.
Thank you.
It's 5.4% over the tax cap. So it's a total of 9.29% for the total budget.
Okay. Trustee Corish?
Just a question. Is the sewer fund part of that tax cap, or does it have its own separate tax cap, or it's all rolled in?
So they're 100% revenue driven. What we have to discuss now is the rates for the sewer fund, and then using any kind of appropriations from that.
I just wanted to confirm. Thanks.
Just to back on the numbers for a second, the 5.4 is that much over the cap at 3.6.
Yes, that's correct.
This year's cap is 3.6 over the previous year.
Right.
And this would take us
Correct.
from 3.6 to 5.4, so 1.8 over the cap.
No, it's a full 5%.
No, it's additional, so
over
it's going to be.
yeah.
Is that saying that the budget is then 8 point
Yes.
something
And again, this-
over last year?
No, it's 5% more. So
But just to be clear, Tim, Jim's question was, the cap is 3.6%
Over the year before.
Correct.
over the year before, and we are
And then
now
this,
go ahead.
And
and we're now at 9.29% with this proposal.
Ah,
Ah,
okay.
okay. All
And
right.
again, this is not using any appropriated funds either.
Got it. Tim, just a couple of specific questions. Is the transient dock figure in this iteration? 65,
Transient dock,
there was an engineering
the transient dock is sorry.
65,000, I think.
The transient dock is going to be paid by that bond. So
Oh, excuse me, may I interject, trustee LaRocca, that actually, the $65,000 is in this year's 2021 budget. We have 65,000 allocated for that.
Oh, out of the bond?
No, not out of the bond. It's in the budget for 2021, and we have a proposal for about $59,000 to do that work.
Okay, and then what's in the budget for the coming year? Or what's in the budget now is enough to pay for the engineering?
Correct. We haven't put anything in the budget to actually do the actual work.
Because we don't have the engineering report, probably till the fall.
Correct.
Well,
I don't know when I can forward you all a copy of that engineering report if you'd like. I can't recall exactly when we received it.
Okay, but in terms of budget making, we wouldn't be addressing that now.
Correct. It hasn't been addressed as of now.
And in terms of, just I'm filling these out because these were acquisitions, the payloader and the truck request from Public Works and Highways. we've treated that in this proposal?
Yes, those are in the proposal.
They are in this budget.
Yeah.
One in the budget and one from reserves. Is that correct, Tim?
Correct.
Tim, do they get
The one
amortized or
from
they,
reserves doesn't have to be in,
I'm sorry, Tim.
the one from reserves doesn't have to be budgeted for. It just has to be a motion to use the reserves. So that's not in the budget. And the other trucks are the 2 trucks.
So that's which is drawn from the reserve is not a cumulative number in our budget. Only the new
No, it
expense
does not.
of the 2 trucks is. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Aiden, your question was?
Correct.
do we account for the total cost of the 2 trucks in this budget, or do they get amortized over a certain number of years?
No,
We
that would be the
pay
full
for them all
cost.
out of,
I think we buy those out of the current budget year.
Yeah.
We
okay.
don't amortize the vehicles, I don't believe.
No.
Am I right, Tim? We don't.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we will continue working with our departments and see, what we can find. I know there is some little bit more state and county money coming in that hadn't been, so we're gonna see what's coming with that. And we'll keep working it and we will be back and discussing it more, but this will be up on the website as of the next day or two.
I'm
Trustee
sorry.
LaRocca?
Could I just come back for one more? I can't read my own writing sometimes. My other question was, where are we on Germain Avenue? We
I budgeted 21,000.
we authorized the topographical survey, which must be at or near completion, I would hope. But there was a larger proposal for the avenue, various elements to it. What do we anticipate in this cycle?
I don't think we have the estimate yet for without the survey coming back, I don't think we have the estimate to know where that's coming. So there's nothing. Tim, is there anything in there at the moment for that?
For drainage projects, we have 21,000.
21,000.
Now, is that the study? Is that the Michael Helmer study? Hellman?
No, that
That
would
is
have come out of,
just the budgeted item for any.
So the topographical study is covered and the first part of the drainage project is covered in this budget?
the topographical survey came out of this year. We
Right.
found it in this year.
Current, oh, I'm sorry, that's right.
Yes.
Current year.
So that's been paid for. So we have 21 to start the project.
The
And
drainage part of the project.
and actually sidewalks and things like that could come from the parking fund presumably.
Yeah. How much do we have budgeted right now, Tim, for sidewalk repair? In general,
I think it was 30,000.
30,000, which is the same as the current, the current, okay.
And
Yes.
and that usually reflects the spot work that gets done.
Right, yeah, just the patching, not major projects,
Is a continuing project.
right?
Thank you, Tim.
No problem.
All right. So can I get a motion to schedule this public hearing for April 13th on this budget and the budget to be posted online?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye,
Aye. All right, next we have a local law authorizing the property tax levy in excess of the limit established in the general municipal law. Again, we are going to do this, hopefully, we're going to pass this hopefully if we need it, and hopefully we will not need it, but better to have it now. So can I get a motion to open the discussion on this, please?
So moved.
Thank you.
second,
All in favor?
aye,
Anyone have any questions or concerns or comments on it?
Just in terms of, this is a conditional authority. Will we, I guess, built into, when we get to the final step in the approval process, we will be specifically acting on that overage if there is.
That's correct. Correct, Beth? Yes?
So this is just put it in our hip pocket.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly how I understand it.
And
Mayor
this year's,
Mulcahy?
just to confirm, this year's percentage was 3 points. The cap was how much?
0.6%, he said.
3.6%. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
This also, Mayor Mulcahy, is actually, the agenda is a little bit confusing. This is set up for adoption, but this is technically to schedule the public hearing for this local law. So it's being introduced this evening and scheduling for a public hearing on April 13th.
So, okay, so we're just opening it. In that case, we're not
Introducing
voting on it.
Correct.
All right,
I make the motion that we introduce.
thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, Beth. Thank you all. Moving on. We have a couple of discussion items tonight. The first and foremost is the Sag Harbor waterfront planning and zoning. This has been a long time coming. Tonight, the process tonight will be, we will go through the entire law, primarily for Trustee LaRocca, Trustee Corish, and Deputy Mayor Gardella to be completely familiar with it. Trustee Plum and I have asked most of our questions. I am definitely asked out. I've asked more than my fair share, I think. So we have Valerie Monastera and Kathy Eisman who are going to take us through it. And this again is for the Board of Trustees. It is not a time for public input. We will, once we get through this will be posted on the website, and then we will start public hearing in April on this and be able to vote, have a, public hearing on the 13th and on the 24th of April, I think. And then with the idea that we will vote on our Board of Trustees meeting in May, we hope. If we do not get through the entire bill tonight after a certain time, it's 6:20 now, I would say we give this about an hour and 10 minutes, but by 7:30, if we are not through, we will reschedule a separate public meeting just for this to continue. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Valerie and take it away.
All right.
Quick
Yeah.
question, just in terms of process. As it comes to us tonight, does it come to us as recommended for approval from the committee? Does it come with your and Bob's recommendation? Or does it come to us as a working document just to set the stage for what it is we're doing?
I would say that the committee is very comfortable with what is being presented to you all tonight. We know there will be more public comments and there will be more public discussion on it, but we are very comfortable with where we are and we like where we are, and we believe that this is a good code at the moment as it stands right now.
And so both you and Bob are part of that recommendation for approval?
Bob?
Yeah, I am.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, Valerie.
Okay, good evening. So, since this is going to be really your opportunity or the board's opportunity to review and ask any questions, I figured I'd start it off with just by asking you, how would you like to proceed? We can go through like section by section and just ask if there's any questions, or if you have specific questions that you already know that you want to ask, we're happy, we can open it up that way as well. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on how you would like to proceed through this.
Figuring that there's information that you're going to present that we have yet to hear, I would prefer that you present first so that we could ask fully informed questions.
Okay, so we don't have a specific presentation.
Mhm.
Do you have your draft, the code in front of you?
Hayden, if I could hook on to what you just said, it might make it easier for the guys presenting. Can you highlight changes from the last draft?
Sure.
We did some of us did some homework. I'm not claiming anything.
No, absolutely.
Leave
That's
it
why we're having this conversation. Sure.
Right. So, but highlight what may have evolved from the last.
Okay. So I'm wondering, Taylor, do you have that, the public comment document?
I'm opening it now.
Okay, perfect. So what I think might be most helpful is we'll go through the different topic areas, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we addressed each one of those.
Valerie, were you going to share the document on the screen as you go through it?
So we were trying to figure this out. So because we can only share the screen once, so we'll probably share. I'm going to have Taylor share the public comment document screen, unless you want us to only share the actual code itself.
Yeah.
Because I think some of the topic areas will hit more than one section of the code, and it might just be.
Will this discussion include the use tables?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because I don't have an up-to-date use table. I just have something with a lot of gaps in it.
Sure. So why don't we do this? Why don't we pull up the actual code itself?
Yeah.
Taylor, let's go back to that.
Sure. Oh, I need, it's disabled at the moment.
Oh, Chelsea needs to give you access.
Chelsea, you're going to let Taylor share her screen, please. And Aiden, you don't have the most recent of the.
I got a use table from Bob, and it has draft on it, and it has a lot of blanks. Basically, it looks at the VBOD.
Yeah, so that's so you should have received I believe as part of your packets. There's a new you have a new, the entire waterfront code was distributed to the board, and that has the use tables that we'll be referring to tonight.
Okay. So was that something that was received very recently?
That was with all the agenda packets every time.
Okay, so it's in the agenda packet. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right, I was looking for a separate document. I have the agenda packet here.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So why don't I talk a little bit about, I'm going to highlight what has been amended since we last presented before the board. And then we can go to those individual sections as we walk our way through them. So first thing, just in general, the sections themselves have been renumbered or realigned so that they can be easily transitioned into the zoning code itself. So that's just more of an administrative thing, but that is one thing that has changed since we last spoke. One of the other things that we did do was change the actual figure of the overlay map. So if Taylor, if you can go down to that page. So as you recall, and Kathy, please feel free to jump in as well. If you recall, there were some concerns about including certain properties within the overlay district. And so those have been revised to be removed from the zoning district itself. And so this is the current zoning waterfront overlay zoning district as proposed.
Valerie, can you point out what was removed? No.
Sure. Well, actually, let me.
All right, Taylor.
I'm just looking for the other version of the map that has
All right, don't
this
make
one.
Yep.
Here we go. So one of the changes was switching the properties that my mouse is highlighting right now from the They were previously in height subzone A, and based on public comment, they've been switched to subzone B.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. So then, are there any questions on this? And as we go through, I'll take questions on each topic that I'm going to discuss. So that way we can address them as we go through the presentation. So are there any questions or comments about the proposed zoning at this, or the proposed actual overlay district boundary at this point?
Just in terms of what you just described, the shift from A to B for those highlighted properties reduces the maximum stories from 3 to 2.
That's correct.
Okay, just to very quickly, how did that evolve from the 3 to the 2?
So that was based upon public comment that came in, that there was some concern about having that the 3 stories would take away from the existing character and would probably potentially push redevelopment in a different direction than the character that is existing today. And so the committee looked at that public comment and agreed, and then that's when we decided to shift the height subzones.
Okay. And is it fair to ask on a change like that, was that unanimous in the committee? Was it a close vote? Was there consensus as you worked this draft?
So I think in this particular item it was unanimous. What I will say this throughout the committee process, there's clearly different viewpoints amongst the committee, but ultimately what ended up in the overlay draft that you reviewed was an overall consensus of the committee. So now that's not to say that a particular committee member might still want to put in public comment through the public comment process, and that is absolutely fine. But overall, there was a consensus to say, yes, we're going to move forward in that particular direction from the committee.
Great, thank you.
May I make a comment?
Sure. And
Yeah,
Taylor, you
and-
want to put up the new, the actual waterfront?
Can you leave that map there for a minute?
Oh, sure.
I don't know if anyone can hear me.
I'm sorry, Dennis. This is really, again, this is not a public comment time period. This is for the Board of Trustees to go through this, and public comment will not be open until after this is put out at the April board meeting.
All right, it's just that it's something that I think the trustees should consider between now and the April board meeting. You've got in this zone B, you got Malloy's structures, you've got the numerous other structures from the yacht club all the way down to Core Maria that are 2.5 to 3 stories now. So now we're creating non-conforming structures in an area that never had non-conforming structures. It seems to me that you're making matters worse for these property owners, and it doesn't comply with the LWRP, which means that in the LWRP, it encourages the expansion of waterfront property owners' rights in getting things done. As to, say, the yacht club, the 25-foot height limitation, let's assume we chose to put a building there. It normally would be a 3-story building. All the buildings to the east of us are all 2.5 to 3-story buildings. So now all those buildings are going to be non-conforming, and they're going to have to jump through a lot of hoops to go to a zoning board of appeals. I think it's not right. Again, this is all really spot zoning.
Right, so might I clarify this information? That while they are 2 stories, every one of the properties that you just mentioned have the ability to go up to 3 stories underneath the new code through
I agree.
a height bonus.
Yeah, some of them are already 3 stories. I mean, Core Maria is a 3-story structure.
Cora Maria is not
Maria's
part
not
of it.
part of this.
Not
All
part of
right, is that all right, so that would be the one that's immediately to the east of
Yes.
that last parcel.
Yes,
I don't know what that last parcel is. It might be breakwater. It could be
that's the yacht yard.
the yacht yard. Okay. He's got 2.5-story buildings on his property already.
So I think this would be best if we have these kind of public comments during the public hearing process. First of all, because then we'll be able to look at your comments and address them. But I think
All I would ask, I'm sorry, Valerie, all I would ask is that the trustees, before they finalize their determination on this, go take a look at these properties and see what impact this code is going to have on those properties. And it's nowhere else in the village is this happening. But I'll voice my objections at a later date.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate your time, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Valerie,
Should we continue?
please.
Okay, so in section 1.43, there was some concern that the code needed to clarify that the historic boards will have the historic preservation architectural review boards will have the same jurisdictions that they have now, and the process would be the same. And so we double checked on that and we clarified that. And so there will be no change in the process for their review. Another change since the last time was section 2.4, which was specifically update the intent of the statement so that the Parks and Recreation Conservation District, so that it's clear in section 2.4 that that the Parks and Conservation District are also included in that section. All right, so the next one was table 3A, building types. So this was
I
just
believe
yes,
that
go
was
ahead.
just a formatting.
Yes, that was
update.
just a formatting update.
Is there any way to make it a little bit bigger? Just, I can't, maybe everyone else can see it, but yeah. I mean, I don't know if that bothers anybody else, but
That's better.
no,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sorry.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
sorry, don't want to
Denise.
make you all dizzy.
Or
Sure.
maybe you could get rid of the thumbnails.
Good idea. Thank you.
Okay, so the next is 3.1.1C3. And so this really deals with the civic buildings. If you can go to the next page, Taylor. So this is really just clarifying the uses of civic buildings, making sure that it's museum, public, philanthropic, fraternal, social. So we just wanted to make sure that the actual uses of the civic buildings were in accordance with the concerns from the committee, which is just clarifying those particular uses themselves. And then I believe there was, is Chris on the phone? Chris, are you?
I'm here.
Okay, perfect. And then there was some concern with specifically with the civic buildings, specifically identifying what would take place if for some reason the civic buildings were to no longer be used for civic buildings, and dealing with the additional height bonuses in the gross floor area. So do you want to, can you talk a little bit about where the text was that you adjusted for that?
We ended up not addressing that, actually. That is not a change we made. And I think there was some concern about that, but it's going to be a fairly rare application of the form-based standards. And it's a specific set of standards designed for uses that are a little different from mixed use or residential uses. And so there's a little bit of flexibility built into the setback and transparency requirements. And that's the only real difference between the other standards for other uses and building types. So in our deliberations, we determined that no change was needed there.
Okay.
And I think what the discussion was with the committee was that it would be like any other civic building that was reused for another purpose, that you would have to do it on a case-by-case basis.
Yes.
If the post office was going to be reused as a residence, for example, how do you account for that? So it does happen sometimes, but we have to look at those individually.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, so the next change was in section 3.1.2B2. All right, so this really deals with the visual access yard, and the concern was that there was some language written that you had these interior side yards, and that if you had a visual access yard, they might exceed the actual maximums of the interior yards. And we made sure that the language reflected that if the visual access yard gets established, and if it is larger than what would be the maximum of the interior side yard, the visual access yard may exceed those standards. And it's right here. It says where the required waterfront yard substitutes for a required rear or interior side yard whenever some such yards coincide. Okay, so the next is section 3.1.2C, and this really deals with the village board recommendations, including requirements for cohesive design for adjacent visual access yards on different properties. So what we did was we added some language where a visual access yard on separate lots abut one another, the planning board must, in its review of the site and landscape plan, ensure consistency and cohesiveness in design between the respective visual yards, visual access yards. So no abutting barrier such as fence or berms may separate the two abutting buildings. So it really is a way of trying to provide that cohesiveness within the visually within the visual access yards. The next is dealing with some additional criteria for, this is section 3.1.4 for the height subzones. And so what we really did here, there was some concern in this particular section that it wasn't as, that the criteria was a little bit too nebulous for a planning board to really make a determination whether a particular project could have the height bonus or not. And so what we did was we added some additional criteria, which specifically looking at, for example, we added criteria so that can you slide down so that I can just, it's on the next page. Perfect. No, I think it's Taylor, one more page, the height bonus going down. Page.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so there it says, in making its decision to approve with conditions or disapprove any request for height bonus, the planning board must weigh public benefits against any adverse impact of the height bonus on public visual access to and from the waterfront. That was something that was extremely important, having it from both viewpoints. The planning board must find that amenity is proportional to the amenities proposed, and the proportionality must be demonstrated by the applicant. So the applicant needs to provide some additional information as to how what they're proposing that the village would get as amenities is equal to what they will be getting and receiving as part of the height bonus. And then also, in addition, the planning board must consider how the amenities proposed further the purposes and policies of the local waterfront revitalization program. And the planning board may seek recommendation from the Board of Historic Preservation and Architectural Review with regards to the proposed height bonus. So the concern was that we want to make sure that from the committee was, and also the public, was that when you have these height bonuses, that they fit in, the characteristic is appropriate for the height bonus. And so we added those additional criteria to hopefully strengthen the planning board's review. Any questions on that? All right, also in terms of the actual bonuses and the amenities that are provided, we did shift those a little bit. We removed public art because there was concern that what is really public art and then how is that really defined? But what we did do is we added some additional restoration of wildlife habitat. We have facilities for public waterfront recreation. We also have incorporation of street trees. And then we also have providing a waterfront walkway within the public waterfront access area. So we added a few other additional amenities that could be provided by an applicant in lieu of the public art. Any questions with that? So the next couple items that we dealt with were really just some labeling, just finalizing just making sure that the tables actually are easy to read and that there aren't any concerns with having to flip between the different pages. So those have been corrected and those are all in section 3. The other clarification we added was also in section 3.2.2, which was dealing with the general building diagram and just making sure that the representation of the diagram is really just intended to illustrate and not necessarily dictate the architectural design. And so we added some language just to clarify that.
And that was added to all 3 building types.
Yes, thanks, Taylor. Okay. So the next is dealing with section 3.3.3C. And this is really dealing with surface parking. We added some information in there that any off-street parking lot in the OD and VB district must be located wholly within the rear yard or interior side yard. And in all zoning districts, no off-street parking lot may be located in a waterfront yard or waterfront access yard.
I think this section, we also removed a reference to the TDM, which was originally recommended as
Yes,
part of
thank
the
you.
code.
Okay. Then the other section was 3.3.5. And this really dealt with mechanical equipment, that the mechanical equipment must be the height, minimum height necessary to perform its proper function. And no mechanical equipment may be greater than 5 feet in height above the roof surface, except where the planning board has affirmatively approved such additional height with a specific reference in the site plan approval. And that was added specifically because there was some concern that, we already have these maximum heights that we're trying to enforce. And then if we were allowing mechanicals as an exception, and that is typical in most zoning codes. But the concern was that if you add that additional height, how is that going to affect the overall visual impacts of the height of the building, especially on the waterfront area? And so we added that a little bit of safeguard to that. So we have a maximum height of the mechanicals. And then also we do allow some flexibility if the planning board feels that it's appropriate and it visually is not going to cause any difficulties.
Just to
Yes.
clarify there, so the mechanical is in addition to the building height. So if
That's
it's 25 foot building height, I can go 30 feet if it includes the mechanical.
That's correct. And there is limitations on the overall amount of the space, the overall square footage of roof area that the mechanicals can actually encompass.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there a setback on the mechanical when it comes to sitting on the roof?
Yes. It's 1.5 times its height. So if something is 5 feet, it would be 7.5 feet back from the facade.
On all sides?
Yes. And so we are so that's why we have the 5 foot height. I think Chris feels comfortable with that height will actually, you really, for the most part, will not see the mechanicals. But we also, again, as we said before, allow a little bit of flexibility because you might even have a situation where you could go a little higher and still not see the mechanicals from, the public right of ways.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, my apology. Before you left parking,
Yep.
what was the reference to TDM?
We originally had made a recommendation that the village adopt a TDM requirement for any property that wanted to, well, actually an opportunity for any developer that wanted to apply for parking relief to provide a transportation demand management strategy in which they identify how much parking is actually needed for the site, how much is available nearby, if they had agreements with nearby property owners and so forth. And that would be support for parking relief. We've taken that out at this point because it needs to be more fully developed by the village. And we didn't want to hold this up at this point. and wait for something. So we have to deal with parking as it's being dealt with currently.
Okay, so two things. So what had been proposed is basically gone from this draft.
Yes.
So there are,
As an alternative way to meet or satisfy a parking requirement. And two, by implication, I think you just said, so as this draft now stands, we would still be operating under the existing parking protocols that we've had for whatever number of years.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that
thank
clarification.
you.
Okay, so the next is the exciting use tables. So I have Taylor, I'm gonna have Taylor switch her screen. She's gonna show you the use tables, and I think it's gonna be easiest if we all look at what is currently allowed in the zone versus what we are proposing. And I'll explain to you some of the restrictions that we've added as special criteria associated with these uses. So let's start off with the VB. Let's start off with the residential uses. Start there. So the current VB does not allow for residential uses, and the proposed VB is still going to, for the most part, maintain those same uses, except for the fact that we're allowing some live-work units as well as upper story dwelling units for the VB. In the OD, two-family detached and apartment buildings are special exception uses, and one family is permitted. And what we are proposing as part of this overlay is that we allow for apartment buildings as a special exception use permit, and not allow for single family and two-family dwelling units in the OD district. And we would still allow for live-work units as well as upper story dwelling units. And then similar to what is currently prohibited in the waterfront, no residential uses would be allowed. One of the things that I wanted to highlight is that as part of we do have some for special exception uses for the apartment buildings. We are proposing that all apartment buildings require an affordable housing component to it. And so that would be carried, you currently have that in your apartment buildings, but this would also be carried forth in this overlay district as well. Okay.
And one more addition to that is that no residential uses are permitted north of Long Island Avenue as well as north of Bay Street.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so any questions on residential uses?
Well, I'm sure it's treated elsewhere as well, but over time, the trouble our regulatory boards have and people have is the clarity of the special exemption standards.
Yes.
And as part of this, you might point us to what work has been done on that.
Right, so the special exception standards right now, where in what's proposed in the code, where it is not specifically identified in the code as having additional special exception standards, the current special exception standards would remain in effect. What we did do is we looked at the special exception standards in your current code and compared it against what we are looking, or the overall vision for the overlay. And so where those did not coincide, we created new special exception standards. So I will highlight those as we go through the use table. But for example, the apartment buildings right now in the current zoning code, you do have affordable housing provisions for apartment buildings, and we brought similar ones over into this overlay district.
Was it your
yes.
judgment professionally that the exception standards that have evolved and have been written over time in the old code, in the existing code, do their job?
Right, so that's a good question, and we'd have to take a look at it for the existing code, but I will say for the waterfront overlay, one of the things that the committee really carefully looked at was the uses that were proposed. So I think for the most part, the uses that are proposed within this zoning table, the committee felt comfortable that if those uses were implemented or brought in to the overlay district, that they would meet the characteristics and the goals of what was being proposed. The special exception uses, standards or criteria that we have in the overlay are just more refining some of those details. And we'll touch base on that. But like, for example, with the retail, we're going to go through retail uses that are proposed for the OD and VB districts, but we're specifically for the OD district, we are requiring as part of the special exception uses that you add, if you have additional restrictions on how large your business can be in square footage wise. So that's how we applied the special exception criteria in this particular overlay. However, you do have special exception criteria, which basically the planning boards do need to find that, what's proposed will meet the certain characteristics of that particular area. And you have some general special exception criteria that they can also apply to their review in each particular use.
You think that by putting in uses that perhaps earlier had been discontinued or subject to special exception process, but by adding back, I don't know what would be an example, certain kinds of retail, live, work, some things like that, that it would be reducing the number of occasions where special exceptions would be sought. They would not be, if something is put back into standard uses, theoretically the special exemption process wouldn't be as frequent.
That's correct. I mean, well, a special exception is really just part of the overall approval process. So if somebody's going before the planning boards, they're automatically going to apply for both the site plan approval as well as the special exception use. So this way, in some of these, we're saying that it's permitted as opposed to a special exception use. And like, for example, we'll use museum and philanthropic, those were special exception uses under the current VB. And their proposed uses now. We feel, or the committee feels, that having it as a permitted use in both the VB for both, like, for example, museum, that it would fit nicely within the overlay characteristics and goals. And so it doesn't necessarily need that additional review. Now, this is just for the overlay area itself. The rest of the VB would still have the special exception use applied to it for museums.
Let's, if we could, just use as an example, because it's come up before, boutique hotel.
Yes.
That would be the identification of a use that we don't have specifically in there now.
Correct.
Okay. And the process for in the overlay district would be what for a boutique hotel?
So that's a good point. So we do have special exception criteria for boutique hotels in the overlay district. We are proposing that no more than 10 guest units are permitted. All guest units must be located above the ground story. So it's not meant to be a standalone boutique hotel. Each guest unit must be transient guest for use and occupancy of tourists and vacationers on transient basis, excepting one unit which may be used and occupied as a residence by a manager, provided the unit is no larger than 400 square feet. That is exactly what is allowed in your resort motel district. Each guest unit must be connected to public water supply and to the Village of Sag Harbor sanitary sewage system. We think that's a really important criteria that's required for boutique hotels. No guest unit may contain cooking facilities. Again, it's meant to be a hotel. Any intensive outdoor activities are prohibited because, again, this is the concern of the overlay, of the waterfront overlay. You know, it's different than your other zoning districts where if you are, it's really meant for hotel uses. No outdoor lighting must not project light onto or be visible from neighboring properties. No outdoor light source may be more than 10 feet above the ground level underneath, and there may be no outdoor public address systems. So what we really did require as part of the special exception for the boutique hotel is that it really is supposed to be just a very small hotel type of situation, and it's not meant to be as a standalone hotel that is reserved for your hotel districts. It really is meant to augment your other existing in a mixed use building that that provides other uses and also brings that kind of atmosphere into the waterfront area. And so we are proposing in the VB and OD to allow those boutique hotels, but not a resort motel.
And just one final question for this. You've just described a very detailed set of standards.
Yes.
In the other places in this use table where something is perhaps going back into permitted status, do you have a similar a descriptor of what standards should apply to that species of newly permitted uses?
So some we do.
Don't have to take us through right now, but
Right.
yeah, that's my question.
So some we do, some we do not. And so as we go through this use table, if there is something that you have particular concern with that you would like us to consider, you know, potentially adding some criteria, we can identify those and then work on adding certain criteria, especially if it's a use of concern.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So Aiden, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Jim brought up the boutique hotel, and we had a very good description of the detail. But does a boutique hotel include a restaurant and a bar as part of their normal activities? And is there a maximum number of special exemptions that can be permitted, or does one special exemption beget another because people cite precedent of, well, I want a boutique hotel too?
So there is no maximum in the special exception permits that can be issued. However, I will say that the intent is not to have restaurants and accessory uses. Really, the intent for a boutique hotel is really you're going to have other uses on the ground floor. So you could have a restaurant there that is part of the overall building, but it's not necessarily going to be structured in a way if you were walking into like a Hilton, you know, and you have like a lobby and, you know, and you have a restaurant there that's specifically only geared towards that hotel. It's really meant to have additional options for your second or potentially your third floor stories within the waterfront overlay.
But it is permitted. I mean, regardless of what the intent might be. I mean, I've been to plenty of boutique hotels where it tends that the restaurant is managed by an outside entity that comes in and runs the restaurant and runs the catering, even though it's co-located with the hotel. So in this situation, as you imagine it, every boutique hotel comes with the possibility of another bar and restaurant that would be open to the public, or
That's
only
correct.
open to the residents?
No, it would have to be open to the public because it would be those uses would be on the ground floor.
And do those uses come packaged, or do they have to be applied for separately?
They would be applied for separately.
So a boutique hotel could be approved, but a restaurant, an associated restaurant and bar could be denied.
Well, if you scroll down to restaurant and bars, I believe that those are. So for example, in the VB district, we're saying bars can be permitted, but in the OD district, it is a special exception. So they are restricted, they'll be restricted in their overall square footage of no more than 1,500 square feet. Right. In terms of a restaurant, we're suggesting that they both be allowed in the VB and the OD district.
Right.
If
one of my questions, we spoke earlier about that any new development here would have to be connected to the sewage treatment plant, which in theory is great, but sewage treatment plant is a finite resource.
Yes.
We're currently looking at areas in the village that where homes are very close to groundwater and septic systems are failing, and we have a lot of nitrogen leaching into the harbor. So a lot of this I see is creating greater demand for the sewage treatment plant, and it's pretty close to being tapped out, right? Once we get through this process. So how, at what stage then do we just deny applications or requests because there is no availability of extra sewage treatment capacity?
So that's typically analyzed in the seeker process, but I know Kathy knows a little, she's more intimately familiar with the studies that are taking place. So Kathy, did you want to weigh in on this?
Well, I mean, I know that Mark Wagner actually brought this issue up when he presented that, who do you assign the sewage, the flow to? Do you actually set it aside on a parcel level basis? Or is it first come, first serve? So I really think it's a much bigger question. But if we actually require connection to the sewer district and there's not availability, then I think that's a hardship. They would not be able to, we would have to go to the zoning board. However, I would hope that we would have capacity for everything on the waterfront.
Well, it depends on, if we're allowing new uses, we're increasing the demand in a way that doesn't exist tonight, for argument's sake. You couldn't have a boutique hotel down there. And so the sewage treatment plant is a finite resource. And, when I look at all these changes in the code, I really have to go through it in a granular way to look at all these uses to see, are you taking into consideration the limitations that we have within the facilities that we can provide people as they want to go through all this development? It seems to me that we're saying on one hand, you must connect to the sewage treatment plant. And then we're saying more than likely, oh, and by the way, we don't have capacity, because I think that's a real issue.
I would have to get Mark Wagner on the phone on this one.
Because I see the capacity that we have available should be used to the benefit of the most people, which is essentially reducing. We have our goal is to reduce the amount of nitrogen entering the water. We should not be using the grants we're getting to increase development, to encourage development. I think there's a big issue here to be discussed.
We did not look at the changes as far as how much flow is permitted under the current zoning versus the proposed zoning, or the actual square footage. So I definitely, we can't answer that question.
Although we will say that the heights that we're proposing are similar, or actually, are of the same height. We're actually reducing heights in certain areas than what's allowed now. And then I think in terms of setbacks, we are actually requiring additional setbacks than what's permitted currently within the VB and the OD district.
I think it's something that has to be resolved before, obviously, this goes further.
I agree, but I just want to point out, if you can hear me, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
That you also limited the size or proposed to limit the size of commercial structures in the OD district, where now we don't have that same limit, doesn't exist. It only exists, I think, in the VB zone. And that proposal is it 1,500 square feet? Am I correct?
That's correct.
So
for a special in the OD district, yeah.
So when we weigh all of these factors, I just didn't want to lose sight of that, because right now we don't have a maximum in place in that particular district.
And this question would also have to be asked about if we take the Bridge Street, Rose Street, Meadow Street, that area, that's office district now. And one of the uses I think being proposed is live work, which I think is a great idea, but none of that, apart from Dodds and Eder, nothing else is connected to the sewage treatment plant. We would like to connect it, but it depends on what the density might be back there as to what as to what flow we should account for. So I don't want to get into the weeds on this tonight, but I do think that there needs to be a more detailed conversation with Mark Wagner before we can progress that.
And he did say that they could do a build out for this once they have the zoning, the recommendations. So
Okay.
I had spoken with him about that.
All right. I would like to be part of that conversation, if I may. Please.
Okay. Okay, great.
Do we have a sense of how many, like what a bar tavern uses of gallonage versus a coffee shop versus a, I don't know, architect's office or an office?
Yes, I can send you the Suffolk County design flow standards.
And this whole sewer connection is clearly a controlling factor here too. In other words, whatever happens, say in the area you're mentioning, it's dependent upon, can they connect? They may not be able to.
Well, they're all connected right now because the pipe runs along Bay Street. So up to a point, I mean, it doesn't go east of the sewage treatment plant, but it goes west all the way down to the hotel motel, and the hotels and the apartments are hooked up. So I just want to make sure that it's not something we overlook as we develop this. It's a whole separate conversation.
Right.
Can I make a comment?
As quickly as we can, though.
Tom?
Tom?
Do you wanna?
Well, I think that that those buildings should be tied into the septic, into the main sewer. I mean, it's waterfront property, and that's the best way, as Aiden was saying, I'm just on the same page as me, that we do want to protect the environment, and we do want those buildings to be tied into the sewer. This is just I think a issue of flow, and if it can handle it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the L section that we're proposing to expand, we have to take that into consideration also. How much is that going to add? So there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. I know we did have one conversation with Mark some time ago, but it'd probably be good to have another one.
We'll get that scheduled before we finalize this.
Mhm.
Okay, Valerie, you want to keep going?
Sure. So should we, let's scroll back up. So, all right, so I think we've touched upon the residential, institutional, governmental uses. I think we touched upon those. So I think the next large is the bed and breakfasts, boutique hotels. And so we've already touched upon those. We are not proposing any changes to what's currently there, except for adding the boutique hotel as a special exception use. Private congregations, those will remain the same as what's currently allowed. The same will also take place for all public and semi-public congregations. So you can scroll down. So retail. All right, so the concern was that we received a public comment that whatever retail we put into the OD should not be directly competing against potential uses in the VB, because we want to retain the vibrancy and the character of the VB district. So the committee looks very carefully at the OD uses, specifically looking at what is currently allowed and what they are proposing. And so they definitely looked at very intensive uses that would require like a draw of a lot of people. Those were removed from the retail. And what they really focused on were more of your specialty shops, as well as, limiting like convenience stores. Something like that is not going to be allowed in the OD district. What we specifically looked at, like I said before, is more of your low traffic kind of specialty retail stores were identified as potential in the OD district. And as we mentioned before, that those would also be restricted to no more than 1,500 square feet of gross floor area. Again, to try to keep the traffic at a minimum, and to, if you are looking for a more intensive use, that you would look at a site along your Main Street area in your VB district. So you can see here from like the current OD, what is the special exception and what we're proposing to change from a special exception to a permitted use. And that really is just a bicycle shop and a clothing store, electronics, and a flower shop. We are not allowing like garden supply, convenience stores, cigar and tobacco shops, boat dealerships. So you can see that what the committee was really trying to focus the OD on is to allow a little bit more flexibility in the uses that can come into the OD, but not necessarily to compete directly with what you have on the in the VB district. The only change to the waterfront district we're proposing in retail uses is allowing a boat dealership from a special exception to an actual permitted use. And then also back to Jim's comments, there are questions that we actually looked up boat dealership in the special exception. There was no specific criteria. So we felt that, it's a waterfront district, boat dealership should be allowed as a permitted use. And then for the VB district, the real major changes, for the most part, we kept everything the same, except that we were restricting the overall square footage of grocery store uses and other retail uses to no more than 2,000 square feet. In addition, some of the other changes, as you can see, for the most part in the VB district, we're proposing to keep very much the same set of uses that are allowed now. We are allowing for sail loft and canvas shop to be a permitted use. For some reason it was not, but since it's so close to the waterfront area, we felt that should be accommodated. In the OD district, we are now suggesting something like a jewelry store or beer or wine shop, a music store, pet supply and pharmacy is a special exception. We are saying sail and loft and canvas shop can be permitted. Stationery store, toys and games, paint, or we're allowing those to be permitted in the OD district. And can you just scroll down a little bit more, Taylor?
I have a question.
Sure.
So 7-Eleven is currently in the overlay district.
Right.
So under this new, what you're proposing usage, another 7-Eleven or 7-Eleven couldn't be relocated or exist where it is currently in the
That's
overlay
correct.
district.
Not in the OD portion of the the water overlay district. It would be allowed in the VB portion of the overlay district.
Let me broaden Tom's question. Something else that occurred to me that's related. In some cases, you could look at some of the items in this list and you seem to be reflecting what might already be there. For example, one of the uses at the 7-Eleven property right now is a liquor store. And is the purpose of, if you go back to that line, liquor store, is the purpose of a beer, wine, or liquor store? In this case, in this case, it becomes another well, it was
permitted, yeah.
It was X'd out. The current status is X, but there is one in place, right? We have a liquor store.
In the VB district, yes.
Yeah, that's in.
But but what is the status of the liquor store in the 7-Eleven building now?
That's in the VB district right now. That's not in the OD district.
So
7-Eleven complex to us, or whatever that address is VB. It's not OD.
Okay,
Yeah.
So the proposed OD would be permitted.
That's right. That's what we're proposing.
I see. So but we're making a judgment that a convenience store currently existing would not be permitted in the future.
Well, if it was already there in the OD district, it would still be allowed to operate. A new convenience store would not be allowed to come into the OD district.
So the fact that the 7-Eleven is in the VB district,
That's correct.
it's, it doesn't carry any status going into the new design.
It would not in the
It's a
proposal.
de facto elimination of a convenience store in that part of town.
Well,
Wait,
Right
I'm
now.
wait, it says proposed VB convenience store is exactly the same as current VB.
In
Right.
BB, yes.
I think he's asking if the store moved from the VB to the OD.
No, no, but
Permitted.
I don't think, he said, well, the first question was, could the 7-Eleven go back where it is right now? And the answer is under the
Yes.
zone, because of the zoning district, yes. So that's the first part of his question. And then maybe there was a second part that I didn't hear yet, but, and which is probably, can it go anywhere else? But
Well,
first,
the obvious reason for the question, not to be cute about it, but there's some activity down where there's some sales and so forth that clearly involves the displacement of folks in that building. And so one of the things, I think this is where Tom's question was directed as well, is where do these existing businesses, 7-Eleven being the anchor in that particular property, but there's a lot of other businesses there. Where do these guys land? Are we displacing small businesses without a landing zone? And that's what I'm trying to suss out of the list. How many actual cases might we be talking about?
So
Without prejudice, I'm just trying to understand how the process will work.
what we're trying to do is these small businesses, whether it's the liquor store or the Chinese, or any small business that wants to come, will have room and be welcome in the OD. But the big businesses, the 4,000 square foot businesses, would not be. And that's really, it's not so much, it's done by uses, but it's really the theory of the small service businesses and things that we're missing in the village. We want to try to make some room for in a place that's more affordable for them. Whereas the larger things that bring in a lot of traffic and need a lot of parking are being pushed to other places.
So is it projected then that, and again, I come back to 7-Eleven because that's so prominent, would be displaced, not by our code so much as by the sale of that property, there would not be a place in the overlay and waterfront district for a like size replacement.
For a like size of what exists now, it could go into the VB district.
Or there are also some alternative locations further down the turnpike. There's some commercial lots there, for instance.
But there's still VB. I mean, there are VB district.
Yeah.
Convenience
So
stores on the VB.
I just want to make sure it's not confusing that. So when you see OD on the chart, that means office district and not overlay district. Because I don't want anyone to think what we're saying is that what Valerie's talking about applies to the whole overlay district. It applies only to the office district portion of that overlay district. The overlay district also has village business with it and some waterfront district. So all three of those zoning districts are encompassed in that overlay area.
Taylor, would it be humanly possible to show the map quickly? Or I can hold it up to my
Denise,
screen.
I was conflating the two ODs.
Yep.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
So, yep.
Well, she said that, but in the broad question about how many of these businesses might land somewhere else, they're certainly okay in the business district.
Right. Yeah. So in other words, nothing's changing in the VB zone with regard to that particular use. It's staying the same.
But as
rules.
to the waterfront district, it is possible that those that are there, located there now, will not have a place in the future.
The only,
Well,
I'm sorry, Denise.
no, go ahead, Barrett. You know the answer quicker than I do. I know you do.
Well, I was just going to say, we're really only looking at if you're the OD, which is the orange here along Long Island, that's the area that we're talking about changing some of those uses and allowing some more retail. In terms of if the convenience store is of concern, that can always be a permitted use in the OD district. I think the concern from the committee and some of the public comment we received was that having more intensive uses should be directed towards your VB districts, as well as just in general, your Main Street area outside of the waterfront overlay.
Okay, I understand. I would just say as we labor along to the next chapter, that I certainly, and I think others that I've heard from, are concerned that while we're engaged in an effort to an overall improvement and protection of the things we value, that the displacement of ongoing real live business, employing real live people, small businesses, should be a priority. That we don't want to see displacements and have the sort of contrary unintended consequence of driving established folks away.
We can always make the OD even more flexible and add more uses into and allow for more of the retail to be permitted. That is something that
I think honestly, I think we should, not now, but that we should look at that use table again one more time, because if you were reading it the other way, then it's got to be so confusing. Like now what's permitted, what's not permitted. So, but if you go back and look at it again, understanding what each of the columns is, it'll be clear that I don't think that this new code increases the intensity or of OD. It adds uses, but I don't know if it necessarily increases the intensity. But as far as I know, it doesn't displace any existing uses that I can think of and make them prohibited.
I think more a question of the real estate that's in play might result in some displacements. And then what I'm looking at is how do those displacements land under the old code and under the new code? But Denise, you know, I confuse easily. So
I suggested
Also,
reading this is simple.
Jim, you had mentioned spot zoning, and that's what you're talking about here. If we accommodate some uses in an area that appears to be going to be developed in some way.
You said I mentioned spot.
Yeah, you said somebody did. Maybe it wasn't you.
Wasn't me.
Okay, sorry.
And also we have to be cognizant that right across the street is residential on Bridge Street. It's unusual. We've got the office district on the east side and you have residential on the other side. So I want to make sure that we consider the residents there and how their lives might change as this zoning changes.
So
I think something very, very easy to do, if there was a key as to what all the various, what does X mean, and P, just simple stuff, would just help this use table a lot.
Yes, so in the actual code itself, we have a very nice, we're just showing you on the Excel to do the comparisons, but in the code itself, there are use tables and they specifically, it is labeled on all the uses. But in terms of the conversation tonight, we thought it'd be helpful for you to understand what's allowed currently and what we're proposing to have be allowed.
Yeah.
Because permitted and prohibited are both start with P and get very confusing.
Would it be possible?
True.
This is so no, I'm not gonna. That would be jumping around. Go ahead. I was just looking at the clock here. We're 7:25, so
we're 5 minutes away.
Right, we are actually the use table was the last thing that we needed to run through. So if if the board wants to, look at the use table a little bit more, we can always have a follow-up discussion on that.
I think that would be a good idea. I really want to go through this, drill through it line by line. I had a question. I was wondering, would it be possible to give us some way of fleshing this out in a visual way? If we were to take one of the biggest properties in town, if you look at the sort of Malloy building where Bay Street Theater is right now, and give us some sort of a form study as to what, if you were to maximize that building under the current code and then maximize it under the proposed code, so we could have sort of some idea of comparing and contrasting in a very visual way as to what the new code would do that the old code cannot do.
So the Sag Harbor Partnership asked the same question, and they asked the consultants to put together a proposal to do 3 different buildings, to do 3 different sites just that way. Unfortunately, the cost was more than the partnership was willing to pay. And the current cost is about $10,000. I don't, give or
It
take.
was 8,000.
So, so we can do that if we want to find some money to put against it.
And that was for 3 properties.
What were the 3 properties were they chosen?
Yeah, we did. We can send it, Kathy, if you would just send that proposal to the Board of Trustees and we can
Sure.
talk about it.
Sure.
I think it would be enormously helpful for the board, and I think for everybody in the village to see what the real, I mean, this is all this like tables and charts and images but it'll be really nice to see what does that mean? What does that mean when applied to our village? And considering the enormity of the ramifications of our decisions, I think, $8,000 would seem like a reasonable amount of money if it could clarify. I'm not sure if this is just me. Maybe everybody else understands this, but I'm kind of a visual person. I've worked in this all my life, and I have a difficult time trying to grasp what does this really mean, so that as we move ahead, we have some clarity on that.
I would second Aiden's idea, and certainly we can find $8,000 somehow. If I understand it, the Malloy property on the wharf and 2 others, sort of a before and after projection. What could happen with no change, what could happen with the new changes. And the 3, you don't have to even mention them now, but would be obvious to all of us that these are places we know. And so we would have sort of a more practical visual feel for what this means. So I second Aiden's proposal.
So we'll get that out to all of you, and I think let's maybe talk about maybe doing a Monday meeting to go through that's just on uses. And we can talk about that proposal at that time as well. Would that work for everyone?
Not, as long as it's not this Monday.
This Monday.
Oh, okay. I have to look at something first.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I just have to check schedule, but
Great.
absolutely, I think it will be time very well spent Monday.
Okay, so let's look at schedules. Let's plan on trying to do it on Monday or Tuesday, or, the board can talk. We will come back with about another hour and a half to sit down and go just focus on the uses, and if there are any other questions beyond that with the board. All right, Valerie, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
everybody.
Thanks a lot.
And actually,
Thank you.
Kathy, maybe we could even get Mark Wagner to join us for a little bit of that meeting as well.
I think,
whenever
yeah,
think-
we should talk to him beforehand and send
Yeah.
him the proposed uses and
please.
explain. I think that would be really useful.
That'd be great.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
everybody. Thank you.
This meeting the next meeting will be noticed as soon as we decide when it is, and the public is welcome to listen. Again, it is though for the board discussion with the writers of the draft. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Moving on to the Sag Harbor Chamber of Commerce, the Arts and Crafts Fair at Marine Park. I know I saw
Here I am.
Oh, great. Thank you, Marilyn. And Marilyn, I apologize. I didn't get back to you, but you don't need a presentation. You just need to tell us what you're thinking and we can
What
just,
I'm thinking is, we want to get back to living again in life. And we'd like to have the Arts and Crafts Fair at Marine Park in a socially distanced way.
and then how do you envision that?
Well, I'd like to have it in the same situation, but what we're going to do is, in the past, each vendor had a 10 by 10 tent and a 12 by 12 space. And there was 3 feet between each designated area. Now we'll have 6 feet between each of the booth areas. And so we're going to, work with all the other fairs.
And have other arts and crafts fairs started up again, or were they
Yes.
going last summer?
Well, last summer there were a few, but now the Southampton History Museum is doing a similar thing. And so we would like to do the same protocols. Vendors must wear proper face coverings over their nose, chin, mouth, yippee. Hand sanitizer for customer use. Do not attend the show if you are sick. Everyone should wear gloves. I mean, it's the same protocols.
Okay. And when are you looking for this?
Well, Father's Day weekend, June 19th and 20th. Marine Park.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Marilyn?
I just have a comment, and it's basically that the whole COVID guidance it's a moving target. So in June, we might find out that things are much different than they are right now. And hopefully they'll be for less stringent measures that have to be taken. That's everyone's hope. So that's the only comment I have.
Well, I like that comment, actually.
I would add that Marilyn and I also walked Steinbeck Park as a possible alternative. And I think we shared a judgment that we'll go back to the familiar. Particularly, there'll be adjustments that will have to be worked out with folks. But Marilyn, you didn't mention the second date. Didn't we talk about early fall or a second, or that your traditional schedule was for more than one?
Yes, you're right, Jim. That would be Harbor Fest.
As part of Harbor Fest?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we got that on the record. So hopefully there'll be enough normality out there that you can do both, I think is what we're.
Well, actually, what we were talking about, and this is a bigger conversation, our annual Harbor Fest, which is over on Long Wharf. We'd like to divide it to perhaps into Steinbeck Park and Long Wharf. But right now I'm here with you tonight just to get this June thing up and running.
Great. Well, we look forward to the Harbor Fest conversation because that is the best weekend of the year out here. And I haven't heard any complaints, so I think put in the application and it seems like it's good to go.
Yay.
And we'll hope it's even better, much better by June.
Yes.
And the only condition we talked about is that Marilyn will be participating in Harbor Frost on the swim. And we're looking forward. I've already signed you up.
Yeah. We'll see about that. So, thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks, Marilyn.
So I was kind of hoping that would be something friendly in between the two more controversial discussions.
Well, I think you were.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Okay, next we have Bay Street Theater. And I assume Tracy Mitchell is on. And if we can unmute Tracy. And I also assume that our police chief is on, Austin McGuire, because I think they are. So, Tracy, are you there?
Sure, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
So,
I'll be,
yeah, why
I'll
don't you
be,
tell us where you're thinking, and then we'll ask AJ to join us.
okay. I just want to read into the record, a note that I sent to the mayor and trustees, dropped off at Village Hall with 144 letters of support for Bay Street to try and get us up and back, and open this summer. And the fact of the matter is, the only way we will be able to do that is outdoors. I know what the governor has said, but we do what Broadway does because we're governed by those unions. We are not a local playhouse. We're a professional regional theater, so we must abide by what our unions are telling us. So right now, the Actors Equity Union is not expecting to be allowing their actors to work at all during the summer indoors. So here's the letter that I wrote with respect. Enclosed, please find 144 letters in support of Bay Street Theater's summer plan of reopening under a tent in Sag Harbor. Many of these are from Main Street businesses who understand the necessity of getting everybody back to work. As previously stated in the past meeting, reopening is critical for a host of reasons. For the staff, our artists and students, and so many others who rely on us, as theaters are the only ones still remaining fully closed due to our art form's unique interactions in tight, close settings. As professionals in our industry, we have always provided a safe and joyful way to gather together to share in the theatrical art form for students and adults alike. And never has the need been more critical than now. We are asking you, our village leaders, to allow us to get back on our feet, thereby providing much needed employment and healthcare that goes along with it, not to mention the $4 million that will go back into our community with house rentals, food for over 100 people throughout the summer, purchases of hardware and from hardware and lumber stores, and so much more. Additionally, we will be pleased to provide needed funds towards the police force as Chief McGuire requires, as well as any TCOs or crossing guards as deemed necessary to make this possible. We certainly do not want to make his job any more difficult. We could hire private security if he prefers. We will do everything in our power to get people back to work and to provide a healthy and safe experience for all, with my respect. And I would just add that we had this conversation, over a couple of weeks now with various members of the Board of Trustees, and AJ and I have had a number of conversations. And I will just say this, as a professional who's been putting on live events for 35 years, including things way bigger than an outdoor tent for 200 people, I find it hard to believe that we as a community can't figure out a way to make this happen. And I have said before, I'm very pleased that you all have taken the initiative to support all the other businesses in town, including the restaurants, and made sure that they're up and running again. And that in fact, it worked out so well that now we're making it permanent. But I hope that you'll do and consider the same for us. Thank you.
Tracy, the current request is for a tent in the corner of Steinbeck Park that
Correct.
would have one edge running along the side of the 7-Eleven building.
Correct.
It would go in the little cutout of the park, if you will. And it would have a stage, and just so that we're all on the same page, how many nights, how many people, et cetera, how long?
We put in the request for 200 people for 6 nights a week. In June, it would not be that. In June, it would be for the weekends, which would be for new works only, which would be dramatic pieces, no music, with performances on Friday nights and Sunday early, I think at 5 o'clock. So in July and August, so starting after July 4th, we would begin July 6th with 6 nights a week at 7:30. The first 2 shows, I believe, would be without intermission. So we're talking about 90 minutes. So we'd be over by 9-ish or so. And then the third show would be Camelot. And that would be, again, starting at 7:30, Tuesday through Saturdays. Sunday would be at 5 o'clock. And that show, I believe, at this point has an intermission.
Okay. Are there other questions from anyone on the board?
I'd like to hear from the police chief,
Okay.
what AJ has to say. I believe there's some code issues too, maybe Denise can
Yes,
speak
both
about.
Denise and AJ are unmuted. Whoever wants to start first.
Denise, ladies first, unless you'd like me to go first.
No, that's fine. Thank you. So I looked when this was on at the last meeting, I started researching the code to see what provisions would govern, use of the tent in the parking area, which is what we were talking about originally. And then I found out later on that I guess that possibility had been nixed and that there was discussion about having it in Steinbeck Park, but the regulations that are in the village code for mass gatherings or public gatherings are the same for both. And if you look at the requirements for them, it sounds like it would be very difficult for Bay Street to meet the elements of the code in order to have the events in Steinbeck Park. And although there is a relief valve that's sort of built into the code and lets you apply to the board for relief, the conditions that are attached to the relief or the elements that you have to meet were so stringent, at least to me, or were stringent enough to me to seem like it would be difficult for Bay Street to be able to meet those conditions as well. So my concern is, purely from a legal code perspective, that the board is probably not authorized to issue the permits under the current village code. But I think that Bay Street should look at the code too and tell me if they think I'm wrong.
Tracy, you've just muted yourself.
Sorry. We did discuss this with our attorney who did not, and that was Tiffany Scarlato, who did not feel that that was an issue. And so I don't know what specific questions you might have, but we all know that this is a completely unusual year. We would not be setting precedent. We could make sure of that, of course, with any application that we put in and anything that was approved. So as a special request or a special exemption, I do believe that this would be possible according to our attorney. And maybe that's another discussion that maybe Denise, you and, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
A new puppy.
Congratulations. The list in the code is pretty straightforward, and I don't have it literally in front of me, but just a bunch of those standards to get what I will call the variance to allow you to have the events. To me, they just jumped out at me as being almost impossible for you to meet, just based on the number of events, the size of the property. There were several issues in there that jumped, and maybe AJ, if you have it in front of you, maybe you can bring up some of those standards, just so it's clear what we're talking about. or I can pull them up. Oh, great. Okay. But I'm happy to talk to Tiffany, and if she has a different legal opinion, that's great. I'd be happy to talk to her about it. But to me, it seemed almost more factual. Like it was just the standards factually were, it seemed like we're going to be very difficult for you to meet. And maybe AJ can give you an example.
That's fine. I would just respectfully like to put into the record that where there's a will, there's a way. And all we're asking for of this village is a tent for the summer because of COVID.
Well, Tracy, you're asking for it for every night of the summer. And that's really.
No, July and August, 6 nights. And we firmly.
That's I feel like that is every night of our highest traffic, highest crowds, highest everything. That's a lot of nights.
So it's 6 nights per week for 2 months. Is that
for July and August, just starting July 6th through Labor Day weekend. At that rate, if we were allowed to have 200 people, we will be losing about $600,000. If it's 100 people, it would be $600,000. If it's 200 people, it would be about $300,000. But we believe that that is part of what we have to offer the village. It is in my
I wish there was a way to ignore the code, but they can't ignore the code provisions. They can ignore my legal advice and overrule my advice, but it just doesn't put them in a very good position. There's no way for them to lift those regulations. As I said, there's already a relief valve built into that code provision. I just don't think you can meet the standards under that, but that's based on my opinion reading it. And, like I said, you guys should do that too. And let me know if you think.
Denise, if you and Tiffany want to talk, let's move on to Chief McGuire, see what he has to say, and then we'll see if it's something that.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yep.
The other part of this is that we are up to the standards. We must be put at the standards of what Broadway is, and that is by the union standards. And they have requested a 45-page list of instructions of what is demanded of us based on COVID restrictions, etc. It is of the highest level. It will cost an additional $175,000 in order for us to make sure that we are at those standards. Those standards are beyond anything that any business anywhere else in this town or anywhere in the United States, except for the theater business, has to maintain. And I'm happy to share those with everybody. So believe me, we would be the safest business in the village.
I don't think anybody is worried about the COVID gathering part of this, but I know that the chief has a number of concerns. So AJ, why don't you?
Hi, good evening, all. Just Tracy and I spoke about 4 o'clock this afternoon, so she knows what's coming. So good evening. I'm going to talk tonight about why I think that erecting a tent for about 100 days in the summertime in a public park, in arguably the busiest village on Long Island, is not a good idea. It would seem that simply because it violates numerous sections of the village code and is statutorily prohibited, as confirmed by our village attorney, would be enough of a reason to not allow it, but apparently it is not. I'd like to say that this is not anti-Bay Street Theater. We appreciate Bay Street Theater in our community. We know how integral it is. Although we emphasize with the situation you're in, it is not hopeless. 1 year ago, we were staring down the barrel of an unknown and very bleak future. Months later, as things were allowed to reopen, even at a reduced rate, we became more hopeful. In the village of Sag Harbor, although the sidewalks were all but rolled up by 10:30 p.m., our emergency services, our police, and our all-volunteer fire departments and EMS were as busy as ever. We continue to be as busy as ever. It seems that we don't have an off season. Having done some traffic studies, I estimate that we have over 100,000 cars coming through this village a week in March. To think that having over 70 special events, as they are defined in the code, would not have an adverse effect on the village would be foolish. It would also not be what history has taught us. If you build it, they will come. This could attract more than just paying patrons. You're essentially providing free theater in the park. While that may seem like a good thing in theory, in the emergency service brain, this provides the potential for more distress and disaster and puts more strain on our 11-person police department and our volunteer fire and EMS. We are currently addressing code issues that ban many things in our parks, and tents is one of them. From an operational standpoint, noise travels, especially over water. Events could generate noise complaints, founded or not, which all have to be investigated, not to mention parking, crosswalks, etc. I know you have said you will provide security during your events. Who in a public park will provide security for the tent the 21 other hours of the day? Are we going to be moving sets back and forth to the theater daily? Who is going to be called when someone sets up a birthday party under the tent and refuses to leave so you can set up for your event? I'm sure everyone can agree the summer of 2021 will be unlike any other summer we have ever experienced. The real estate market has been booming and rentals are all but taken. We're going to see a surge unlike anything we have ever seen. And we will still have two police officers on duty most of the time. I have heard hire more police. That's all well and good, but certified police officers are as sparse as summer rentals. There's not been a police academy since the last class graduated last March. The first one in a year starts on Monday. 3 months or so ago, as the vaccine started to roll out, only healthcare workers and those 75 and older were permitted to get it. Supply was sparse and the future continued to be a bit unknown. Today, vaccine supplies are good and is now available to those 50 and over. I expect in 2 to 3 months from now, most of the population will be vaccinated and COVID restrictions will be mostly gone. Current positivity rates for COVID are below 3% statewide and less than 4% in Suffolk County. The theater will return. We are still permitted to have events there today and I expect soon to full capacity. I'm just going to read what a small portion of the chapter 85 of the village code, which pertains to all this stuff. The purpose of this chapter is the village board finds that events which attract a large number of people, if not regulated by the village, can adversely affect the well-being of village residents. Large gatherings can disturb nearby residents in the peaceful enjoyment of their homes and property and can be harmful to the public safety and welfare. Large assemblages of people generally require some control over traffic and parking and can cause a strain on police services, particularly during the summer months. Experience has shown the need for procedure whereby the village can be informed in advance of such gatherings and can regulate them. This is not something new. A lot of codes are put in place from lessons we have learned from our past. The predecessors to this board put this code in place for a reason, not to punish, but to protect. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Thank you, AJ. May I respond?
Yep. A minute.
AJ and I have spoken, and we had a talk today as well as a couple hours of a meeting. I would just respond by saying that I hope that Bay Street is not going to pay the price because we have a popular place to be and a popular summer coming up that we all believe will be a big one. Bay Street itself will no longer have its 300 people that would normally be in the theater, period, end of story, all summer long. It's not going to happen. So by agreeing to either 100 or 200 people to be across the street outdoors, we see that as less. I understand that when they're in the theater, as AJ described to me, when they're in the theater, they're my problem. When they're outdoors, they're his problem. But the reality is the number of cars is less and the number of people will be less. And yes, I am willing to take responsibility, and Bay Street is willing to take responsibility for 24 hours a day worth of security so that nobody is using our tent unless we've allowed it, unless the village has blessed it. I was asked before I presented this to allow and ask the cinema to partake in it, which I've offered it to them. I've also offered it to the American Music Festival, to Kelly, So it's not strictly in use for Bay Street for that hour and a half or 2 hours. Again, it is not 100 nights. If it's the 9 weeks from July through August, it's 54 nights. And I think that's all I need to say. Obviously, we will have less people in the village due to Bay Street, and I hope that Bay Street won't pay the price for whatever else is going on this summer.
Do any of the other trustees have anything they want to say? Is there anybody in the public who would like to speak about this? I would ask that it stay to 3 minutes or less if you do. I don't know if there's a hand raised, if you can raise a hand or Stephen Hamilton. Can you unmute yourself, or Chelsea, can you unmute Steve? Thank you.
Hi, it's Steve Hamilton, Redwood Road, Sag Harbor. I think it was about a year ago that I was before the board with a request to present outdoor cinema, as I was interim executive director at the Sag Harbor Cinema. And it was unprecedented at the time. And there were a lot of concerns. There were a lot of concerns about security, about how to logistically to make it work. It had never been done before. But I worked with the board, I worked with AJ, and we found a way to make it work. Not only that, but it went pretty much without a hitch throughout the entire summer. I know that the volume of performances, what we're looking for at Bay Street is much greater. But we did it. We were able to make it work. And as Tracy said, we're offering to pay for private security in a way to cover every one of the concerns that AJ can bring forward, I hope. I just want to say that, to reiterate what Tracy said, the village has done somersaults to help the restaurants, and I'm so glad that they did. They've performed somersaults to help the cinema last summer. I think it's time to help Bay Street get through one of the most difficult times we're facing in our 30-year history. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen. Anybody else?
I did forget to mention, to address one other issue that AJ raised, which was the sound. And as mentioned at the last meeting, rather than have the tent open, so for the sound to be, I mean, my hope was that other people could come and sit on the grass and enjoy the sound as they picnic. But if that's a concern that additional people will gather, we can have the whole thing done on private mics into headphones so that only the people that have paid would be able to hear it. But I just thought it would be a nicer thing for other people on the lawn to be able to hear. It would not be the kind of thing that would echo back over the water, because the speakers are all very directional into the tent. So you're not going to be able to hear from that far outside of the tent itself.
All right. Board of Trustees. If there are no other.
One
Trustee
question.
Marsh?
Denise,
Yep.
could Denise share her interpretation of the code with the board so that we can have her opinion? And
I'll have to pull up that section.
okay, I mean, not right now, just.
I didn't. Oh, okay. Yes, of course. Yes.
That would be
It
part
will.
of the report back after you met with Tiffany.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to.
All right. So why don't we say this? Well, Denise, you'll meet with Tiffany. You'll give us a report on the code. Maybe when we talk next Monday. I know, Tracy, you are time sensitive on this because you do need to get your actors and actresses booked and places for them to live and tents ordered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we need more information. We need more conversations. And I think that we can add this to some of the conversation, whether we do a meeting on Monday or Tuesday. Deputy Mayor?
I'm just going to say I thought with AJ, when he spoke, he was very eloquent and he put things into perspective. And I think with the legal counsel's advice, I cannot support it. So whatever, I'm sure that Tiffany and Denise will talk, but I'm just going to go on the record and say I'm not supporting it. Even though I did want to see it in the park. I did want to see Bay Street go ahead and have something this summer. I just think that it's just overwhelming.
Yep. And Tracy, I know you want, as you say, you'll only lose X hundreds of thousands if you do it this way or that way. I would see if there was any way you could make it a smaller program, if it was less shows or something to lessen some of it, some of the impact. So that's just, and maybe you can't, but it would be a conversation worth having.
Less of an impact in the number of days.
The number of days, the length of the time, maybe it's not 3 shows, maybe it's not the experimentals, maybe I don't know what works for you, what doesn't work for you, maybe none of it works for you unless it's everything, but I would suggest that you think how it could be not quite as.
I hear what you're saying. We have taken down obviously to not having a June season of 9 shows a week, so only 2 shows a week in June. And we've taken it down from not having 9 shows a week in July and August down to 6. I just don't know that we can afford to lose any more. The reason we came up with that number is that because we did get the PPP funds that we are able to employ people.
Okay.
And so that is my goal, is to keep people employed.
Okay.
I
So
have a question.
I hear
another question.
Yeah.
Are they the fact that the actors union is refusing to perform inside, even though, CDC, as I said earlier, it's a moving target. The guidelines continually change as we get better. Are you getting any relief for that or any funds to offset your losses for that? From the federal or the state government? Nothing?
No, there is nothing.
No loans to cover your expense or
There's
loss?
nothing awarded to that. The only thing we've been awarded are PPP funds to try and employ artists, which we've done during the winter, just to put things out digitally. But that is not a business. It doesn't pay anything. And so we literally just got the second round of PPP funds. The first round got us through last year, thank God. The second round is to really try and employ artists this year through the summer. But I can tell you,
refusing to perform indoors.
yes, they're not allowed.
It's
Right.
not.
It's not that the artist.
Union. Yeah, it's not the artist. It's the
Not
union.
the artist. Believe me, those poor people haven't worked in a
Right.
year. And by the way, their health insurance is based on the number of days they work. And for 99.5% of them, they haven't worked in a year, which means they've all lost their health insurance, which means no matter what happens, I want to employ them this year with those PPP funds. I don't know how else to say it, but that is my goal. And as I always say, where there's a will, there's a way.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Also Denise and AJ. We'll regroup on this. And
Yes, I want to thank them both as well. I know they're working very hard.
Thank you.
We have a walk-on in public discussion. That's Jamie Hook.
Can you hear
Getting
me?
tired here. You're on. Yes.
Okay, so first of all, thanks for having us. Second of all, I think we've narrowed our request as you recall, a request to use Marine Park in association with a bike-in. And the plan is developed now, but there are 3 potential dates. One is Wednesday, the 7th of July, then the following Sunday, the 11th of July, and finally Sunday, the 5th of September. The last Sunday is Labor Day weekend. The first, but just a note, those 2 Sundays would be devoted to the bike-in, and I'm having a good time working with Jason over at Sag Harbor Cycle, and I think it'd be kind of nice to have a home team advantage of being in the only town that had it twice. Everywhere else is doing it once. So that would be my request. The hours we anticipate are, 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. The questions that I would want to put very directly are, what would be the possibility to use the bathrooms during that time? And then I've already spoken with Mr. McGuire. He was very busy. We plan to speak again tomorrow, but one of the things that we would have to submit on our way to this is this safety plan that you guys could all look at quickly and just, sign off on. And for example, and this is one thing I discussed with Officer McGuire, and he mentioned the being strapped, having not very many people. I imagine that if we encourage people to bicycle into Marine Park, they have 2 choices at the end of the evening. They can either lock their bicycle up, and I think one of the things we need to do is make sure there is some kind of a facility for them to feel comfortable. And I do not have the answer to that, right yet, but I can think of many ways to do it. And I think the second possibility would be to just send a police car just to the edge of town, going very slowly at just at the time that this thing kind of let out, just to give that little extra sense for the bikers behind. I've already talked with Jason about, he's excited to sell lots of bike safety lights and things like that at the event, and I think that would be fun. So that's the event in a nutshell. The one that you hadn't heard about is on Wednesday, the 7th. That would be a screening following what I believe is the women's boat race that takes place with the Breakwater Yacht Club. And they had voiced some interest in screening a film then, something that appeals to yachters. So if that was possible, we thought that would be a good warm up for these other 2. So that's our request. And I would love to answer any questions you have.
I have no questions.
Has AJ weighed in with an opinion on all this?
No, like I said, I talked to him 2 days ago, and he didn't give an opinion specifically because he was very busy, and he promised to talk to me tomorrow. I'm supposed to talk to him in more detail tomorrow. But he said in general, the thing that we had to be wary of was just how overtaxed the police department is in general. So, that tells us that if we have to look for an extra source of protection or security, that's something we'd really like to entertain. By the same token, part of me wants to think that an event that's well organized and trusting of its public earns a place in their hearts that they reward by allowing it to go on, and we may be able to do this with the resources at hand. But I think AJ has to really weigh in and understand what that is.
Yeah, I would like to hear from the chief before we sort of offer any opinions.
AJ, you there?
Hey, I'm sorry, you're not letting me on video.
Oh,
That's okay, I'm having a bad hair day. Jamie, we had a nice conversation the other day. We're gonna further it. This is only 3 events over the course of the summer. I did make them cognizant of that, but I think we can probably work something out together, and I look forward to that.
I love the idea. I love the idea of the theater. I love the idea of any art in the village and any performance. But it's really important that everybody's on board. So if our chief can see how this can be managed, I have no problem with it at all. I welcome it. The bike ride out of town sounds a little flaky right now. I guess we can get that.
Nighttime biking, daytime biking is bad enough and dangerous enough in the village, but we'll
yeah.
No.
We can encourage
Jamie,
walking their bikes home.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, to the village, to the edge of the village. It just seems like knowing what traffic's down there and everybody leaving at the same time.
That sounds like one key element that's missing that I will assemble for this plan is Mr. Jason Lucas, because I know that they stage a lot of bike rides over the summer. So surely he's experienced in how to deal with this kind of thing. And I think his input.
And I know Jason as well. And I'm happy to work with him.
Excellent.
All right. I don't believe we have to vote on this, Beth, do we?
I
You
don't
can
think
nod.
we've
Just-
received sorry about that, Mayor. I don't think we've received an application yet.
Okay, so once you get the full application in, actually, I think we did because I remember Jamie's signature was so.
So I remember there was something, but I think, has the event changed since the initial
I
application?
believe we had the application from quite a while ago, and it reflects a thing at Havens Beach that we.
Oh, all right,
Well, we will finish that application and we'll get into you this week.
great. Thank you.
So much.
And do you have a movie theater opening this week or next week?
Sorry, we're not this week, not this week. No, the theater will open on the 9th of April. And it's very, very, very explicitly a soft opening because, you know, there's so many people who we want to have come celebrate the real opening that we thought it would be wise to put that off until more people can come. And, you know, so on Memorial Day weekend, we plan to have an opening. This is our soft open.
The fact that you're even able to open the doors is magnificent. So we're thrilled for you.
Thank you guys so much. So yeah, big
To
summer.
even talk about it with any degree of certainty is remarkable. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, it really is.
How about
Great.
that?
All right, thank you. We do have public comment. We can have public comment.
The record about our about Fran at the sewage treatment plant. And
Yes, please, go ahead.
I'll just take a moment, everybody, just to say it gives me great pleasure to inform everyone that Fran Scavone has passed all 4 of his New York State SDP operation exams. The final one was today. Fran is now a New York State wastewater treatment plant operator, grade 2A. And this is a remarkable achievement. Fran passed every stage of this very tough exam, or all 4 of them, at his first attempt in the shortest possible time. And he did all of this during COVID over the last year. This is not only great news for Fran, but it's great news for the village. Having another licensed operator, especially one Fran's experience and commitment, is really reassuring for all of us as we move ahead with their service area expansion plans for the sewage treatment plant. I'd like to express my gratitude to Dee Yardley. He fosters an environment at the sewage treatment plant that encourages every employee to develop a knowledge-based skill set and qualifications for the benefit of all of us in the village. So congratulations to Fran. Thank you for your indulgence.
Okay.
Here, here.
Here, here.
Okay.
All right. We do have a little bit of time for public comment, but we are not taking public comment on the waterfront zoning. So please, feel free to make a comment, but not on waterfront zoning. We will not take it. It will not be part of the public record. So if anybody has anything else, and it is limited to 3 minutes. Adam, I'm assuming you do, because I see that you, yes.
Yeah, so this is Adam Potter. I'm Chair of Friends of Bay Street. And a lot was talked about the 7-Eleven, and I don't want to discuss,
And again, we are not going to talk, I'm sorry, we can't talk about the waterfront planning.
Okay. But I would just open it up that if any of the trustees do have any comments about the actual 7-Eleven or any of the other convenience stores that are planned for the village, I'd love to, open that up and take those comments.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Do we have anyone else? All right, then we are going to, Chris Seifert.
No, but. Yes, hi. My name is Chris Seifert. I'm just finishing up my term as interim director of the Parish Art Museum. We have a new director coming on board. I'll still be at the Parish Art, but in a different role. But I just wanted to, as a member of the Hamptons Art Network and as a member of the arts and culture community, I just urge you all to embrace and encourage the summer season of Bay Street Theater. Arts and cultures are vital anchors of our communities. I know you all know this. They contribute immensely to our quality of life. They attract people and to local eateries and shops. They contribute to our tax base and they provide jobs. And I think what's really been my experience over the last 30 years in my career within the arts and cultural sector is that they solve problems creatively. We solve problems creatively, and we seek to solve problems on behalf of a larger context, not just in a self-serving way, but in a very unselfish way. So I encourage you to embrace and encourage and support the Bay Street summer season. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, if there is nothing else, we will move on to the business part of our agenda. We have lost Trustee LaRocca. He has no internet service in his in his current location. He is trying to call in. I don't know if he has gotten on yet or not. But Chelsea, if you see somebody calling in, that's Trustee LaRocca. So we will move on to the correspondence requiring action. Resolution in March 2021, authorization for the mayor to execute any and all documents pertaining to the Preserve New York program. Can I get a motion, please? Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Authorization to approve Fighting Chances application for the use of the transient dock beside Long Wharf on May 22nd from 5 to 8 p.m. This is pending insurance, but we are confident that that will come. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Resolution to adopt the Village of Sag Harbor, New York State Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative. This is something that Chief McGuire has worked very, very hard on. There has been a great committee that worked on it. And Chief, if you want to unmute, I see Angela Vallet, who's one of our members. Thank you for joining us. This is a labor of love. This is something that the governor told every village, town, or county who has a police force that they had to do. It was a really great exercise of looking at what we are and talking to our community and sharing what our police force is with our community and sharing our community with our police management on how they feel about our police. I think it's a great living document, and that's the key thing. We will sign it. We will send it up to Albany by April 1st. It is on our website if anybody wants to read it. It's really a great window into the Sag Harbor Police Force and into the challenges that that the police force faces, but also the challenges that many of our neighbors and our communities face. So I encourage you to read it. And I cannot thank Chief McGuire and the entire committee enough. And Chief, if you have the list of the entire committee and you'd like to read it, that would be wonderful.
Thank you for putting me on the spot, Mayor.
If you don't have it, I'll find it while you're
No,
talking.
I do have it. I know there's 9 of us, so I can say it's myself, you, Angela, the Rabbi, Dan Geffen, Brian DeSessa, Gregory Sujet, Stephen Roach, Angela, who's on with us tonight, Elena.
Elena Kropman.
And am I missing one?
Yes. I can't.
Stephen Roach, Elena. I'm sorry, I'm not looking at it. I wasn't prepared to.
Actually, she was on earlier.
Dr. Applewhite, yes. I
Yes,
thought I mentioned her.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, here. Nope, that's not it. Yep. Elena, Dr. Applewhite, Angela, Stephen, Gregory, Brian, the Rabbi, me, and you, Mayor.
There we go.
Right in front of me. So yeah, it was we've been doing this for it seems like quite a while. Angela, I'm still working. I'm sorry, I'm still working on that amendment that we had discussed last night, and I will get it to you before we send it to the state. So just so that everyone knows. But what you see on, except for maybe one paragraph, which is just clarifying some language, is what will be going to the state. probably will most definitely before April 1st. But I just wanted to get the committee to see my amendments and go from there. But yes, it was quite a journey. We did learn a lot, like the mayor said. I think it's a good living document. This is something we probably should have done years ago and never was done nationwide, really. But it gives us the ability for the public to really see what we do as a police department, how we do things, how we our policies, our hiring processes, how we deal with people. I mean, there's a lot of so many different things that people don't realize that goes on here. But I thank everyone on the committee for their participation. Angela, you were very key and still are. I've offered her a job with the village, but she's declined. So,
I think you offered her my job.
we're not going to talk about that right now. But no, I mean, it really was, and it's nice to obviously get to know some more members of the community that I have not gotten to work with prior. So thank you all again.
And we will continue through the summer with monthly meetings of the committee, and then probably go to either every other month or once a quarter. And if there are other members of the community who'd like to be part of this ongoing committee, we are going to add some more people to it. It is great conversations, and I think a lot of good will actually come out of this. I think a lot of people felt this was a little bit of busy work at the beginning, but I do know that my cohorts in Suffolk County and on the East End have all found this to be a worthwhile practice, and something that we can now also talk to one another about and think about how do we start getting maybe New York civil service to reform a little bit so that it's easier to find a more diverse police force, because right now they make it as difficult as humanly possible, seemingly. So, Angela, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mayor Mulcahy. I'd like to start by thanking you and Chief McGuire for your leadership in bringing this group together. It was a very constructive process. We started meeting back in December once a week. It was great learning about what the police force is already doing, and great getting to know colleagues on the committee. So I think it was a very transparent and constructive process, and I feel good about the recommendations that we've put forward, and I'm excited about the prospect of continuing some form of advisory committee and inviting other residents to join us. So thank you for allowing me to participate.
Great.
Thank you for participating again, Angela. We appreciate it.
Chelsea, can you let Jim LaRocca in? He is in the waiting room on his phone. Thank you. Thank you, Angela. Okay, can I get a motion to approve, or Tom, do you have a question, or are you making the motion?
I just wanted to thank everybody involved, and I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you very much. And
I'll second that, and also thank everybody involved. I think it's an amazing undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get all in favor?
Aye. I think Jim is on his way back in.
Jim, we hope you're in favor. Tom, did you voted yes?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Authorization to approve the First Presbyterian Church application for use of Havens Beach for the Easter worship service on April 4th at 11 a.m.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Authorization to submit payment to ESO Solution Inc. in the amount of $3,690. Wow, let me try that again. $3,669.82 for the SHVAC patient care reporting suite for the term of 4/12 to 4/11/2022.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
By the way, this is our recording, our computer recording system that we use, electronic PCR, and that's the company that handles it to collect data and store data as it comes to patient care.
That's great. All right, can I get a second?
Aiden second.
Second.
Okay, Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jim, did you join us? You there? We hope, maybe. Okay.
I think so, yeah.
I need a resolution to accept donations that we recently received. Beth, you want to tell us anything more about that?
Oh, sorry. We've received 3 donations this fiscal year. 2 were for the police department. One in the amount of $5,000, the other in the amount of $10,000. The third, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry. The third was in the amount of $25,000 for the waterfront overlay district proposed code. And we must formally accept them into the record. So,
Okay, can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. A second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Authorize the payment of additional funds for engineering services and any related services in the additional amount of $147.50. This is what I love, the government.
I'll move.
Can I
I'll
get a
second.
motion? Thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Deborah O'Brien, President of the Sag Harbor Volunteer Ambulance Corps, requests permission to add Caitlin Hand to the insurance rolls.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And finally, authorization for the mayor to sign an agreement with the town of Southampton for the water quality improvement project funding award in the amount of $72,400.
I'll make the motion. That's to accept the contract from the town of Southampton, who have, it was a CPF grant to continue the sewage treatment plant master plan. So I make the motion.
Great.
I just want to let Beth know that I did review it and approve it. There's one very minor typo in it that I will
Okay.
email you. It's just the wrong village name is in there. That's all. It's not substantive. So
okay, great. I was just going to ask you that. Thank you for answering. Did you have a chance? I was going to say, send in your review. Thank you.
They're sending our money to someone else?
It's the village of, I think it was Patchogue. Is there a village of Patchogue? It was another village. Okay, so that's where it's going. Yes.
So we have the motion. Do we have a second?
Assuming it's going to the right village, I'll second.
Favor.
Aye.
All right. If there is nothing else. I don't know if we ever found, I know that Jim can hear us, but I don't know if he can talk, but if there's nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn?
No, so moved.
What? All right. All in favor to adjourn. Good night,
Aye.
all.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you all
Thank
in the
you.
audience for sticking with us. It's always fun. Good night.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Night.
Bye.